The next thing it seems like part of your job at SparkToro is to explain a relatively new service to people in a way they can understand it and see the value. I think this is something that a challenge a lot of people face in all sorts of ways, especially when it comes to marketing. So I want to know in general, what are your best tips for people who need to explain things to an audience that maybe are a little complicated through content or marketing?
Yeah. So content or I think a lot of top funnel content. So traditional content marketing or modern content marketing, like podcasts, right?
Mhm.
And PR efforts, events, right? All the top of funnel stuff. Those are all really, really good opportunities to essentially normalize the conversation around the obscure product or service that you sell. So in our case, we sell or create audience research tools, right?
Mhm.
And I think audience research is something, well, it's something that not a lot of people are searching for just yet. I think
Mhm.
it's something that as you understand what audience research is, researching your audience, it's not anything that's totally groundbreaking or new. It's just that people don't really have the shared terminology for that yet. So a lot of the work that we do at SparkToro is normalizing the phrasing, right? Like normalizing what it means to do audience research, or knowing when to do audience research instead of market research, or how the
Mhm.
two can kind of coexist, right? So if I say anything like I think people should do more audience research and less market research, it doesn't mean that I think market research is bad. I don't think that. I think what I think anybody would agree with is market research is expensive, right? It costs tens of thousands of dollars to run high quality surveys. It takes a lot of time and effort to run and parse the insights from focus groups, right? It's expensive work, and
Mhm.
not everybody is in a position to be able to do that. And audience research is something that is a lot more accessible to more people, and more people like of any or any at, for any company at any stage of growth, right? Could be like if you were looking to set out to start your own consultancy, you could do some audience research, right? So a lot of how we think about this is, so also when I say normalizing this conversation, I would add to that connecting the dots between audience research or the obscure topic and relatable examples. So
Mhm.
how might you use audience research to pitch yourself to join someone else's podcast, right? Pitching yourself to join a podcast is a very relatable, very normal, common thing to do. But how can you use audience research to do it? So the way I would recommend it, for example, would be, looking for, if you have a following, right? It would be looking at searching for the podcasts that are influential in your niche, right? So maybe it is, or influential to your audience. So you could maybe then make the case to the podcast host, like, hey, you know what? I have a following, and a lot of people who follow me engage with your podcast. I would love to join, and we can talk about, X, Y, and Z. So connecting those dots, making that a lot more easier and relatable, and providing just a lot of use cases for
Mhm.
your obscure product or service.
What do you find, or how do you approach when you're trying to explain this and especially introduce sort of, and I think I agree, everything you said makes complete sense to me and I think is really smart. What do you do when it feels like they're still not getting it? Right? Like even if, it's funny because a lot of times I say like it's never it's never the sort of buyer, or the audience, or the customer's fault if they don't understand. Even if they should, even if they're dumb. Right? Like, even if they're dumb, it's not their job. It's my job to figure out a way to make them understand, at least understand. They may not want it. It may not fit for them or whatever. But if there's confusion, that's my fault, my responsibility, not theirs. Right. So how do you approach, or what do you do if you're doing everything quote unquote right, but they're still not quite getting it, or they're still kind of misunderstanding it? How do you, I guess in a way I'm asking, like, how do you troubleshoot when you're trying to explain something and your message isn't landing? Like, where do you start to
Yeah.
figure out why not?
Yeah. So if I can interact directly with the customer, whether it is over email, in person, through a webinar, right? If I can have any kind of one-to-one interaction, then I try to get a sense of what is blocking them, right? Well, what is it that they're stumbling over? right? But and the best or the main way I would approach that is by asking them, what is a problem that you've had? Like, what's a marketing
Mhm.
struggle you've recently had? It doesn't matter what it is, whether it is trying to get executive buy-in on whatever project it is or campaign, or your campaign it just didn't land well with the audience. Then from there, I would try to troubleshoot that problem and figure out like, okay, here's where I think this went wrong, or here's what I think you could have done differently. And I think this would have been more effective in, maybe if you got buy-in on, maybe your, CEO didn't want to fund the podcast that you wanted to launch, then maybe it would be, make understanding the sources of influence, or like in my case, digging into the Sparktoro tool and then trying to connect the dots between podcasting and the business case for
Mhm.
it, which is kind of the language that a CEO in this fake example would
Right.
understand. So I guess it's really just trying to be empathetic to all of the stakeholders involved and figuring out how to get on their level and meet them and really meet them where they are.
Yeah. And I'm guessing, I assume, like, at least this is what I've found in my experience, is that getting specific and sort of zooming in, right? It's so much easier almost to understand a specific use case, a specific case study, a very like small micro thing of this is how this is, and you sort of explained it when you were talking about before, like, this is the goal that you have. This is how you could use this product specifically for that. And I feel like it's easier for people to understand and extrapolate from there. Then I think a lot of times people get stuck in the big, broad, oh, we have this tool that does X, Y, and Z and can do a million different things. And I think it's tougher to understand broad than it is narrow and specific. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
So that all makes sense. And I think it's hopefully really helpful for people in terms of figuring out, again, it is something I think lots of people struggle with, and hopefully that can point them in the right track to explain things.